The space station, called Harmony's Edge, floated in the darkness between three star systems. It was home to over 40,000 beings from dozens of different species. Some had scales. Some had fur. Some had shells or feathers or skin that changed color with their moods. They all lived together, worked together, and mostly tried not to annoy each other too much. The station never truly slept. There was always someone awake, always lights on somewhere, always the hum of machines keeping everyone alive in the cold emptiness of space. But at 0347 station time, when most of the day shift workers were deep in their sleep cycles, something happened that had never happened before. Every alarm in the Valkyrie residential sector began screaming at once. Commander Rax was in his office when the alerts flooded his screens. He was a Corvian, a species that looked something like a giant insect standing upright. His compound eyes could track 40 different objects at the same time, and right now, all of them were focused on the emergency display in front of him. His forearms moved across different control panels as he tried to understand what he was seeing. The Valkyrie nursery had been breached. Not from outside, from inside. And all 12 cubs that had been sleeping there were gone. Rax felt his blood turn cold. The Valkyrie were one of the most powerful species in the Galactic Union. They were proud, ancient, and very protective of their young. Their cubs looked like a mix between earth foxes and small bears, covered in soft silver fur that seemed to glow in certain light. They were considered almost sacred by their people. Each cub was precious beyond measure. Losing one cub would create a political nightmare. Losing all 12 could start a war. Rax grabbed his communication device and called for Security Chief Bora. She was human, one of the newer species to join the galactic community. Humans had only been traveling between stars for about 200 years, which made them practically infants compared to species that had been doing it for millennia. But Bora was good at her job. She was calm when others panicked. She thought clearly when others became confused. And she had a talent for solving problems that made other species nervous. Bora arrived at the security center within 4 minutes. She was a woman of average height with dark hair cut short and eyes that seemed to notice everything. She walked with quiet confidence, and when she entered a room, people paid attention. "Show me," she said simply. Rax pulled up the nursery footage. The room looked peaceful at first. 12 small shapes lay in their individual sleeping pods, each one designed to mimic the conditions of the Valkyrie homeworld. Soft blue light, gentle vibrations, the perfect temperature. Then, at 0339, something changed. One of the cubs lifted its head. Then another, and another. Within seconds, all 12 were awake and alert, their pointed ears turning toward the door. They did not look scared. They looked curious, interested. The nursery door opened. There was no sign of forced entry, no alarm triggered. It simply opened, as if someone had used a proper access code. And then the cubs walked out. All of them, together. In a line, like they were following something. Or someone. What in the stars? Rax muttered. Bora leaned closer to the screen. Tracked their thermal signatures. Now. The station's computer began tracing the cubs' path. They had moved through maintenance corridors, areas that were usually empty at that hour. They passed the hydroponics bay, where the station grew fresh vegetables and fruits. They went through a section of storage rooms. And then the trail ended at the entrance to the human residential quarter. Bora felt something heavy settle in her stomach. The human section of the station was a place most aliens avoided. Humans liked their environment warmer than many species preferred. They cooked their food using heat, which created smells that some aliens found unpleasant. They played loud sounds they called music. They decorated their spaces with strange objects and images. They were also the newest species on the station, which meant they were the least trusted. When something went wrong, humans were often the first to be blamed. It had happened before. A missing tool, a broken system, a misunderstanding, and suddenly, everyone was looking at the humans with suspicious eyes. Now 12 Velthari cubs had vanished, and the trail led directly to human territory. "Get Ambassador Veth," Bora said quietly. "She needs to hear this from us before she hears it from anyone else." Ambassador Veth arrived with fire in her eyes. She was tall for a Velthari, her silver fur darker than most, almost gray. She had been in the middle of her rest cycle when the call came, and she had not bothered to change into formal clothes. She wore simple sleeping garments, which somehow made her look even more dangerous. "Where are my cubs?" she demanded. Her voice was low and controlled, but everyone in the room could hear the threat beneath it. "We are tracking them now," Rax said carefully. "The trail leads to the human residential section." Veth's golden eyes turned to Bora. They were filled with something that might have been hatred, or might have been fear, or might have been both mixed together. "If your people have harmed even one hair on their heads, we will find them," Bora interrupted. She kept her voice steady, even though her heart was beating fast. "I will lead the search myself. You have my word." Veth stared at her for a long moment. Humans were strange creatures. They made promises constantly about everything, as if words alone could shape reality. Most species found this habit foolish. But there was something in Bora's eyes that made Veth pause. Something solid. Something real. "Then find them," Veth said. Quickly. Bora nodded and turned to her team. She had 7 security officers ready, a mix of different species. She looked at each of them in turn. "We go in quiet. We go in careful. Whatever happened to those cubs, we need to find out the truth before anyone else gets hurt. Understood?" They all nodded. Bora took a deep breath and started walking toward the human quarters. With every step, she felt the weight of what was coming. If the cubs were hurt, humans would be blamed. If humans were blamed, there would be consequences. Bad ones. She could only hope that whatever she found would not be as terrible as she feared. The doors to the human residential section opened with a soft hiss. Warm air rushed out, carrying the smell of something cooking bread, perhaps, or some kind of soup. Somewhere in the distance, music was playing. A slow, gentle melody with a woman's voice singing words Bora could not quite understand. She stepped inside, and the doors closed behind her. The search had begun. The human residential section of Harmony's Edge was different from everywhere else on the station. Other species kept their living spaces clean and simple. Walls were bare. Floors were smooth. Everything had a purpose, and nothing was wasted. But humans seemed unable to live that way. As Bora led her team through the corridors, she saw what she always saw when she visited this part of the station. There were pictures on the walls, photographs of places on Earth, paintings of landscapes that probably did not exist, posters with words and symbols she did not recognize. Someone had placed a small plant in a pot near a doorway. Another door had a colorful mat in front of it with the word "Welcome" written in several languages. The other members of the search team looked around with confusion. They did not understand why humans needed all these things. They did not understand why the temperature was so high, or why the air smelled like food even in the middle of the night, or why there was music playing softly from somewhere down the hall. Bora understood, but she did not have time to explain. She divided her team into pairs and sent them in different directions. The thermal tracking showed that the cubs had entered this section, but the trail became confused after that. Too many heat signatures. Too many warm bodies moving around. "Search every room if you have to," she ordered. "But be polite. These are people's homes." She took the youngest member of her team with her, a human named Taiho. He was a junior engineer, not a security officer, but he had been in the area when the alarm sounded and had volunteered to help. He was tall and thin, with messy black hair and a face that smiled easily. Everyone on the station knew him because he told terrible jokes that made people groan even as they laughed. "Where do we start?" Taiho asked. Bora thought for a moment. The cubs followed something. Or someone. They went willingly, we saw that on the recording. So we need to find who they were following. Maybe someone with food? Maybe, or maybe something else. Valkyrie cubs are curious by nature. They might follow anything that interested them enough. They walked through the corridors, knocking on doors, asking questions. Most humans they met were confused and half asleep. None of them knew anything about missing alien cubs. Some of them seemed worried when they heard the news. Others seemed scared. They knew how bad this could be for all humans on the station if the cubs were not found safely. After 30 minutes, Taiho stopped in front of a door near the end of a quiet hallway. He tilted his head, listening. "What is it?" Bora asked. "I thought I heard something." He pressed his ear closer to the door. "It sounds like rain." Bora frowned. "Rain? Inside a room?" "There's a sound. Like water falling. And something else. A voice, maybe?" "Very quiet." Bora checked the room assignment on her portable device. The quarters belonged to a woman named Haijin. According to her file, she was a pediatric specialist, someone who worked with children. She also ran a weekly storytelling session at the station's community center, where beings of all species came to hear tales from different worlds. "Should we knock?" Taiho asked. Bora hesitated. Something told her this was important. Something told her this was the answer they were looking for. But she was not sure if she was ready for what they might find. "Open it," she said quietly. Taiho entered his security override code, and the door slid open. The room inside was warm and dim. Soft lights glowed in the corners, creating shadows that moved gently on the walls. There was a smell in the air, something sweet and calming that Bora could not identify. And there was sound. Just as Taiho had said, the sound of rain falling, mixed with a slow, steady rhythm that might have been a heartbeat. But that was not what made both of them freeze in the doorway. In the center of the room, there was a large, soft cushion, what humans call a beanbag. It was enormous, big enough for several people to sit on. And on that cushion, covered in blankets of different colors, were the cubs. All 12 of them. They were piled together in a way that Bora had never seen before. Their small bodies were tangled together, fur against fur, tails wrapped around each other. Some lay on their backs with their paws in the air. Others were curled into tight balls. One was making a small sound, almost like purring, as it breathed in and out. And in the middle of this pile, surrounded by sleeping cubs, was a human woman. She had long, dark hair spread across the cushion like a fan. She wore soft clothes that looked comfortable for sleeping. One cub was pressed against her chest, held gently in her arms. 2 more were using her legs as pillows. A 4th had somehow crawled onto her shoulder and was sleeping with its nose pressed against her neck. She was also completely asleep. Taiho made a small noise. It might have been surprise. It might have been laughter. Bora elbowed him in the ribs to keep him quiet. "Get Commander Rax," she whispered. "And Ambassador Veth, now." Taiho nodded and rushed off. Bora stayed in the doorway, watching the scene before her. She did not know what to feel. Relief that the cubs were safe? Confusion about how this had happened. Fear about what the Valkyrie would think. The woman Haijin moved slightly in her sleep. The cub in her arms made a small complaining sound, and she automatically adjusted her hold, bringing it closer to her body. Her movement was practiced, natural, like she had done this 1,000 times before. Minutes later, footsteps approached from behind. Bora turned to see Commander Rax and Ambassador Veth arriving together. Their faces showed very different emotions. Rax looked bewildered. Veth looked like she was ready to tear the room apart. "Where are?" Veth began, but the words died in her throat when she looked through the doorway. For a long moment, nobody spoke. They just stared at the impossible scene in front of them. The cubs were sleeping. Not just sleeping, but deeply, peacefully resting in a way that Veth had never seen before. Velthury cubs were known for being restless sleepers. They moved constantly, woke up frequently, cried for reasons their parents could not understand. They did not pile together like this. They did not look this content-dog, and yet here they were, safe, calm, sleeping like they had never slept before. What did she do to them? Veth whispered. Her voice was different now. Not angry, not afraid. Something else entirely. "I don't know," Bora admitted. "But I think we should wake her up and ask." Rax stepped forward carefully. He reached out one of his forearms and gently touched Haijin's shoulder. The woman's eyes opened slowly. For a moment, she looked confused, blinking at the alien faces staring down at her. Then she seemed to remember where she was. She looked at the cubs piled around her. She looked at the security officers. She looked at the Velthury ambassador, whose golden eyes were wide with shock. And then she said, the last thing any of them expected. "Please don't wake them," she murmured softly. "They just got to sleep." The station's conference room had never felt so tense. Ambassador Veth sat on one side of the long table, her claws tapping against the surface in a slow rhythm. Commander Rax stood near the window, his compound eyes moving between everyone in the room. Security Chief Bora leaned against the wall with her arms crossed, watching everything carefully. And on the other side of the table, holding a cup of hot tea in both hands, sat Haijin. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she kept yawning despite trying to hide it. But there was something calm about her, something steady. She did not look like someone who had done something wrong. She looked like someone who had done something necessary and was now waiting to explain why. The cubs had been moved to a temporary medical facility for examination. The doctors there had reported something strange. The cubs were in perfect health. Better than perfect, actually. They showed signs of deep, restful sleep, the kind of sleep that Velthury cubs rarely achieved. Their stress levels were lower than normal. Their bodies were relaxed in ways the doctors had never recorded before. Whatever Haijin had done, she had not hurt them. But that did not explain what she had done or why. "Start from the beginning," Bora said. "Tell us everything." Haijin took a sip of her tea. It was the same kind she always drank, a blend from her grandmother's farm in Korea. Back on Earth, the smell alone made her feel more centered, more prepared. "I visit the nursery once a week," she began. "It's part of my job. I check on all the young ones on the station, make sure they're healthy and happy. Different species, different needs. I've been doing it for 2 years. Veth made a sound low in her throat. "We know this. Get to the point." Haijin nodded. 3 weeks ago, I noticed something during my visit to the Velthury nursery. The cubs weren't sleeping well. They were restless. Some of them had been crying for hours. The nursery attendants told me this had been going on for days. But they couldn't do anything about it. Couldn't? Rax asked. "Your tradition," Haijin said, looking at Veth. "Minimal intervention. Cubs are supposed to learn to comfort themselves. The attendants are there to feed them and clean them and keep them safe. But they're not supposed to hold them or rock them or sing to them. Is that correct?" Veth's fur bristled slightly. "It is how we have raised our young for thousands of years. It builds strength, independence. On your homeworld," Haijin said gently, "where there are electromagnetic fields in the atmosphere that naturally calm developing nervous systems, where the vibrations of the planet itself create a frequency that helps infants relax. where the air carries particles that have a mild sedative effect on young Valkyrie. The room went very quiet. Haijin continued. I did some research after my first visit. The Valkyrie homeworld does most of the work of soothing babies. Parents don't need to hold their young constantly because the planet itself is holding them. But here, on this station, there are no electromagnetic fields, no planetary vibrations, no calming particles in the air. The cubs were experiencing something they were never designed to experience: true isolation. Beth said nothing. Her golden eyes were fixed on Haijin's face. They weren't crying because they were weak, Haijin said. They were crying because they were scared and lonely, and no one was helping them. So you took them? Beth said. Her voice was flat, dangerous. No. Haijin shook her head firmly. I didn't take them. I opened the door and called to them. Softly, gently. I sang a little, just a lullaby my mother used to sing to me. And they came. All of them. They followed the sound of my voice because it was the first thing in weeks that told them someone cared. She set down her teacup. I didn't force them to do anything. I gave them a choice. And they chose to come with me. The silence stretched on. Bora watched Veth carefully, trying to read her expression. The ambassador's face was unreadable. What did you do with them? Rax asked finally. In your room. What did you do? Haijin smiled for the first time. It was a tired smile, but there was warmth in it. I made them comfortable, she said simply. I turned down the lights. I put on sounds that babies like: rain falling, heartbeats, soft music. I made the room warm and humid, like being inside a nest. I gave them blankets to snuggle into and each other to hold on to. And then I sat with them, touched them, let them know they weren't alone. That's it. Rax sounded surprised. Just made them comfortable? There's no just about it, Haijin said. Comfort is one of the most important things in the universe. When you're small and scared and the world feels too big and too empty, someone telling you that you're safe, someone showing you that you're not alone, that can mean everything. She looked at Veth directly. Your cubs have been suffering, not because anyone was cruel to them, but because no one understood what they needed. The conditions on this station don't match the conditions on your world. Without adjustment, without help, they were slowly becoming traumatized. Veth's claws stopped their tapping. For a long moment, she didn't move at all. The doctors say they are healthy, she said quietly. They're healthy now, Haijin agreed. One good night of sleep can do a lot. But they need more than one night. They need someone to help them adjust to life on this station. Someone to comfort them when they're scared. Someone to hold them when they cry. That is not our way. Then maybe your way needs to change. At least while you're away from your world. Haijin's voice was gentle but firm. Traditions are important. I respect that. But traditions that hurt children, even accidentally, need to be examined, adjusted. The universe is bigger than any single world. Sometimes we have to learn new ways of doing things. The room was silent again. Bora found herself holding her breath. Finally, Veth stood up. She walked slowly around the table until she was standing directly in front of Haijin. She was much taller than the human, and her presence was intimidating. Her claws could have torn Haijin apart in seconds. But she didn't attack. Instead, she did something that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. She bowed her head. My people owe you an apology, she said quietly. Not for taking the cubs. You were right to help them when we could not. We owe you an apology for what we would have done if they had been hurt. We were ready to blame you. Ready to blame all humans. Without evidence. Without thought. Haijin stood up slowly. You were scared for your young. That's not something to apologize for. That's just love. Beth raised her head. Her golden eyes were bright with emotion. "How do you know these things?" she asked. "How do humans know how to care for young that are not their own? Our species have almost nothing in common. And yet, you knew exactly what my cubs needed." Asian smiled again, and this time the smile reached her eyes. "Because human babies are exactly the same," she said. "They're scared and lonely, and the world is too big for them. And for 300,000 years, we've been figuring out how to help them feel safe. That's a lot of practice." She reached out and gently touched Beth's arm. "Let me teach you," she said. "Let me show you what we've learned. Your cubs don't have to suffer anymore. None of the young ones on this station have to suffer. We can help, if you'll let us." Beth looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Show me," she said. The station council chamber was full. Representatives from every species on Harmony's Edge had gathered to hear the presentation. Some were curious. Some were skeptical. Some were confused about why they had been called to a meeting about sleeping babies when there were trade agreements to negotiate and resource allocations to discuss. But Commander Rax had insisted, and Ambassador Veth had supported him. And so they came. Dr. Junho stood at the front of the chamber, preparing his presentation. He was the station's human xenobiologist, a scientist who studied how different species lived and grew. He was a quiet man with gray hair and glasses he did not really need, but wore anyway because they made him feel smarter. He had been awake for 36 hours, reviewing data and preparing charts and trying to understand what Haijin had discovered. What he had found had changed everything he thought he knew. "Thank you all for coming," he began. His voice was soft but carried well in the chamber. "I know many of you are wondering why we're here. The short answer is, we have discovered something important. Something that could change how this station operates. Something that could change how the entire Galactic Union thinks about certain things." He pressed a button, and a holographic image appeared above the council table. It showed a human infant, small, pink, helpless. "This is a human baby," Junho said. "Newborn. About 6 hours old. Look at it carefully." The representatives looked. Some made sounds of confusion or disgust. The human infant looked fragile, weak, unfinished. "Human babies," Junho continued, "are among the most helpless creatures in the known galaxy. When they are born, they cannot walk. They cannot feed themselves. They cannot regulate their own body temperature. They cannot even hold up their own heads. Compared to the young of most species represented in this room, human infants are essentially premature, incomplete." He changed the image to show a Velthary cub. By contrast, a Velthary cub can walk within hours of birth. It can eat solid food within a week. It has functional senses and basic survival instincts from the moment it takes its first breath. The same is true for most species. Your young are born ready to face the world, at least in basic ways. He paused, looking around the room. This raises an interesting question. If human babies are so helpless, how did humans survive as a species? How did they not go extinct millions of years ago? No one answered. They were all listening now, curious despite themselves. "The answer," Junho said, "is that humans developed something no other species has developed to the same degree. They developed an incredibly sophisticated system for keeping their helpless young alive. They became experts at baby care." He pressed another button. New images appeared. Human parents holding babies, rocking them, singing to them, feeding them, wrapping them in soft cloths. Human babies require constant attention for years. Not days, not weeks. Years. During that time, human parents must keep them warm, but not too warm. Fed, but not too much. Clean, but not too clean. Stimulated, but not overwhelmed. It is an incredibly complex task, that requires constant adjustment and attention. Sounds exhausting, someone muttered from the back of the room. It is, Junho agreed. Extremely exhausting. But because of that exhaustion, humans have spent 300,000 years developing techniques to make it easier. Ways to calm a crying baby. Ways to help an infant sleep. Ways to comfort a frightened child. They have refined these techniques over countless generations until they have become almost instinctual. He changed the image again. Now it showed Haijin in her room, surrounded by the sleeping Valkyrie cubs. What Ms. Haijin did last night was not magic. It was not some mysterious power. It was simply the application of 300,000 years of human parenting knowledge. She created an environment that told those cubs, on a deep biological level, that they were safe, warm, protected, not alone. Ambassador Veth stood up slowly. You are saying that what happened to our cubs? Humans do this all the time? With their own young? Every night, Junho said. Every human who has ever had a baby has done some version of what Haijin did. Rocking, humming. White noise, that's the rain sound you heard. Skin contact. Heartbeat sounds. Specific temperatures. Specific smells. Humans have mapped out exactly what infant mammals need to feel secure, and they apply that knowledge constantly. He looked at Veth directly. Your species evolved on a planet that did most of this work for you. The electromagnetic fields. The vibrations. The particles in the air. Your world was essentially one giant nursery, keeping your cubs calm without any effort from parents. But here, away from your world, those conditions don't exist. Your cubs were experiencing what human babies experience naturally, a universe that feels too big, too cold, and too empty. Another representative spoke up, a Glorvian, a species that looked like moving crystals. Are you suggesting that humans could do this for any species? Kamini young? Junho nodded slowly. That is exactly what I am suggesting. Human parenting techniques are not specific to human biology. They target fundamental mammalian needs: warmth, rhythm, touch, presence. Many species share these needs, even if we don't realize it. Valkyrie cubs clearly do. I suspect many others would as well. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Representatives turned to each other, discussing what they had heard. Some looked skeptical. Others looked thoughtful. A few looked almost hopeful. Haijin had been sitting quietly in the back of the room. Now she stood up. May I say something? The room quieted. Everyone turned to look at her. This isn't about humans being better than anyone else, she said. It's about sharing what we know. Every species has things they're good at. Things they've learned over millions of years. Humans learned how to take care of helpless babies because we had to. Our babies were so helpless we had no choice. She walked forward, moving to stand beside Junho. But that knowledge doesn't belong only to us. It can help anyone. And I think... She paused, gathering her thoughts. I think maybe that's why we're here. Not just humans, but all of us. On this station, in this union, we're here to share what we know, to help each other, to learn from each other. She looked at the cubs, who had been brought to the chamber in a small portable bed. They were awake now, watching everything with curious eyes. One of them made a small sound and reached toward her. Haijin walked over and picked it up gently. The cub immediately snuggled against her chest, making that soft purring sound she had heard before. They don't care about politics, she said softly. They don't care about species or traditions or who's been traveling through space the longest. They just know that someone is holding them. Someone is warm. Someone cares. She looked up at the representatives. Isn't that what we all want, really? To know that someone cares? The room was silent. Commander Rax looked at the faces around him, saw something changing. Walls coming down. old suspicion softening. Finally, the Glorvian representative spoke again. How would this work? If we wanted to learn these techniques? Haijin smiled. It was the same warm smile she had given Veth, the same smile she had given the cubs. We teach you, she said simply. We show you what we know. And maybe, in return, you teach us something too. That's how it works. That's how we get better. She looked at the cub in her arms, then back at the council. That's how we become a family. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. The station would create a new program, an interspecies childcare initiative, led by human experts but open to all. It would study how different species raise their young. It would share techniques that worked. It would help young ones from every world feel safe and loved, no matter how far they were from home. And it would all start with one simple lesson: how to help a baby sleep. 3 months had passed since the night the alarm screamed through the Valtteri residential sector. 3 months since 12 small cubs had wandered through dark corridors, following the sound of a stranger's voice. 3 months since a human woman had fallen asleep surrounded by alien children, not knowing that she was about to change everything. The station was different now. The Interspecies Comfort Center had opened 2 months ago, built in a section of the station that used to be empty storage rooms. Haijin had designed it herself, with help from engineers and doctors and parents from a dozen different species. The walls were soft and covered in materials that felt good to touch. The lighting could be adjusted for any preference: bright for species that liked the light, dim for those who preferred shadows. The temperature varied from room to room. The air carried different scents in different areas. And everywhere there were sounds: heartbeats, rain, ocean waves, wind through forests, music from 100 different worlds. Whatever a young one needed to feel calm, the center could provide. Haijin stood in the main room, watching the morning activity. She had a new title now: Chief Comfort Officer. She had laughed when they gave it to her. It sounded made up, ridiculous. But the work was real, and it mattered, and that was enough. Taiho was in the corner, surrounded by 3 Glorvian larvae. The crystal creatures were usually cold and silent, but something about Taiho made them active and happy. He was making funny voices and telling stories about brave adventurers exploring caves. And the larvae were flashing different colors in response, their version of laughter. He had discovered his gift by accident, but now he spent every free moment at the center, entertaining the young ones who needed it. Nurse Minji was in the quiet room, humming softly to a Corvian infant. The Corvians were usually proud and private, but they had been among the first to bring their young to the center, after hearing about what had happened with the Valtteri cubs. Their infants were sensitive to sound, and Minji's voice had exactly the right frequency to calm them. She could put a crying Corvian baby to sleep in under 3 minutes. And there were others. Volunteers from every species, learning human techniques and adapting them for their own young. A Valtteri mother who had learned to rock her cub in her arms instead of leaving it alone in a sleeping pod. A Glorvian father who had discovered that his larvae liked being held near warm objects. A Corvian elder who had started singing lullabies for the first time in his long life. The center was becoming something more than a nursery. It was becoming a community, a place where species who had barely spoken to each other for centuries now gathered to share stories about their children, to laugh about sleepless nights, to complain about toddlers who refused to eat their food, to celebrate first steps and first words and first attempts at flying or swimming or changing color, to be parents together. Ambassador Veth visited almost every day. She said it was for diplomatic observation, to ensure that the program was running smoothly and that Valtteri interests were being respected. But Haijin had noticed how the ambassador always found reasons to linger. How she often ended up in the Valtteri cubs' room, watching them play. How sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, she would pick up one of the cubs and hold it close, breathing in its scent, feeling its warmth. "You could join us, you know," Hyjin had said to her once. Officially. As a volunteer, Veth had looked at her with those golden eyes that had once been filled with suspicion and anger. Now they held something different. Something softer. "Perhaps," she had said. "Perhaps I will." Today, Veth was in the center early. She was sitting on one of the large cushions, surrounded by cubs, not just Valtteri cubs, but young ones from several species. They had climbed onto her lap, onto her shoulders, onto her tail. One was playing with her fur. Another was trying to chew on her ear. A third had fallen asleep against her side. She looked ridiculous. She looked uncomfortable. She looked happier than Hyjin had ever seen her. "You're good at this," Hyjin said, sitting down beside her. Veth made a sound that might have been a laugh. "I am covered in small creatures who are drooling on me. I am not sure good is the right word. Trust me. That's exactly what good looks like." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the cubs play. In the background, Taiho was teaching his Glorvian friends a song about a rabbit on the moon. Minji was helping a new volunteer, nervous. Corvian, who had never held an infant before, learned the proper way to support a baby's head. "I received a message from my government this morning," Veth said suddenly. Hyjin looked at her. "Good news? They want to build centers like this on other stations. On colony worlds. On transports that carry families between star systems." Veth paused. "They want to send representatives to learn from us." "From you. From all of us," Hyjin corrected gently. "Yes, from all of us." Veth was quiet for a moment. 6 months ago, if you had told me that my people would be asking humans to teach us how to raise our young, I would have called you insane. We are an ancient species. We have been raising children for longer than humans have existed. The idea that we could learn anything from you." She trailed off, shaking her head. "But you have taught us something," she continued. "Not just techniques for helping babies sleep. You have taught us that being strong doesn't mean being alone. That asking for help is not weakness. That caring for young ones is not something to be endured. It is something to be shared, to be celebrated." She looked at Hyjin with those golden eyes. "You have taught us that the universe is less cold than we believed. And for that, my people will always be grateful." Hyjin felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them away quickly. "You're going to make me cry," she said. "And if I cry, the cubs will get upset." Veth made that almost laughing sound again. "Then I will stop being sentimental." For the cubs. They shared a smile. In her report to the Galactic Union that night, Commander Rax wrote, "Humanity's greatest contribution to interstellar peace may not be their weapons, their technology, or their stubborn refusal to give up. It may be their simple, evolved, patient ability to comfort the crying young of any species, and their inability to hear a baby's cry without wanting to help." At the bottom of the report, she added a personal note. "Recommend all stations acquire soft blankets, warm milk, devices that play gentle sounds, and at least one human who knows how to sing lullabies. The galaxy has been doing childcare wrong for too long. It is time we learn to do it right." On the station, the night shift had begun. The corridors were quiet. The lights were dim. In the Interspecies Comfort Center, Hyjin made her final rounds. She checked on each room, each young one, each sleeping bundle of fur or scales or crystal. She adjusted blankets. She fixed pillows. She hummed softly to any who stirred. In the main room, she found Taiho asleep on one of the large cushions, a Glorvian larva glowing softly beside him. Minji was curled up in a chair, a Corvian infant cradled carefully in her arms. Even Veth was still there, surrounded by cubs, her eyes closed and her breathing slow. Haijin stood in the doorway and looked at them all. Aliens and humans. Young and old. Different species from different worlds, sleeping peacefully together. This was what she had wanted. Not power or recognition or fame. Just this warmth, this peace, this feeling that somehow everything was going to be okay. She dimmed the lights a little more. She turned on the rain sounds, soft and gentle. And then she found an empty spot on the big cushion, lay down carefully so as not to wake anyone, and closed her eyes. Outside, the stars kept spinning. Ships came and went. The universe continued on its endless, mysterious way. But inside the comfort center, in the heart of a station floating between worlds, babies slept. And the people who loved them slept beside them. And for now, that was enough. That was everything. The end.